So there are plenty of available classes currently in the game, but in the actual lore, there are about just as many that are available in Warcraft 3 or were mentioned in the books or just in the lore in general that you might not even know of that could be introduced later down the line, or they may not be possible with the way the game currently is, but they're really interesting. Now, I've actually made videos like these before, so I'm not going to cover the well-known ones that I've talked about before that you already know of, the witch doctors, the necromancers, blademasters, and all those classes, but I really want to mention the obscure ones, the ones that are not widely known, such as bombardiers, alchemists, and a bunch of other really interesting combinations. So what are these classes that are available, that exist, but are not playable? So before we continue, today we have something you probably never seen before, something really cool, Yahaha Studio, a creation platform where you can create your own multiplayer experience without any coding or server knowledge in as straightforward manner as possible. Yahaha provides users with millions of ready-to-use 3D assets, and cool enough, they're not in a download package but in a cloud drive, meaning they can be streamed to a local client at any time. To put it in as simple words as possible, you can build your own multiplayer creation without any coding or special knowledge. You can just use the components and the smart assets provided by the Yahaha Studio. Now, what is super cool is that when you finish your work, you can publish the creation to the cross-platform app available on mobile and PC, where other players can discover it and join to play. Now, if you use my link below, you can join Yahaha's early access right now. You can participate in the community challenge to win an actual cash prize, so make sure to check out Yahaha Studio. Sapper. This is sort of an umbrella term, as they're known as saboteurs, demolitionists, grenadiers, and a lot of similar names, but this class is really interesting because it could legitimately become playable, and they would be really unique and fun to play as, and seriously just unlike anything that we currently have in the game. Originally, in Warcraft lore, the sappers were mainly goblins and gnomes, and we had something similar to mortar teams that are dwarves and dwarven demolitionists, but right now a lot of races are able to use the same tactics, which is why I think this could become a really interesting class. For example, we have seen the goblins teaching the Iron Horde to become sappers to use this technology, and they have used the technology to a great extent. Now, of course, the class would not work as it did in Warcraft 3, as in the game they literally just blew themselves up, but the way they work in the lore, it could be incredibly interesting. They could maybe throw bombs, grenades, they could use something similar to mortars or automatical mortars similar to turrets, they could set up traps, explosives, and ultimately it could be a mechanical, really fun class to play. Seeing that goblin and gnomish technology is now very widespread with the establishment of the Horde and the Alliance, I really see no reason why pretty much any playable race right now wouldn't be able to become a sapper or a demolitionist, so they wouldn't have to limit this to just 2-3 races, as they are planning to reduce restrictions. Realistically, these sappers could be introduced to all the races that we currently have available. Apothecary. This is yet another class that could easily become playable and that will be really interesting to play as. So, you must have heard or seen the Apothecaries in the actual game almost exclusively as the Forsaken ones. There are even the Grand Apothecaries, such as Grand Apothecary Putris. However, these guys are not selling you medicine, but instead they build terrible chemical weapons of just mass destruction. Think of them as something akin to Forsaken witch doctors, and they are rarely frontline soldiers. They're almost exclusively support characters brewing healing potions, alchemical potions, reinforcing the lines, and also decimating the enemy lines with terrible weapons. Realistically, this could also be mixed with a class that you might remember that was available in Warcraft 3, known as the Alchemist, which was literally just a goblin riding an ogre using potions, having healing abilities, and just throwing bombs. So Apothecaries and Alchemists could be merged into a single class. Now, immediately when you think of the word Apothecary, you definitely think of the Forsaken, and while they are mainly undead, there are also Pandaren, Blood Elven, Draenei, and Nightborn Apothecaries, and really, it is a thing that pretty much every race can learn, as it is just a skill, literally just alchemy. Now, in their current form, they are mainly political figures building plagues, doing research and creating antidotes, but they could very easily be adapted to an actual class with healing and destructive abilities. Think of it as the way the Brewmasters were adapted to the monks, because Brewmasters were available in Warcraft 3. It would essentially be the same principle. Plus, as I mentioned, there was the alchemist back in Warcraft 3, a unit that you could play as, so they could use both of their abilities and turn them into a really interesting melee DPS and a support class. Imagine using those flamethrower things that they have on their backs, and they could use them to do chain heals and also destroy enemies with direct abilities as well as damage over time. It could really be turned into something super interesting. Tinker. This is yet one of those classes that could very easily be added, especially as we got mechanomes, and they, in my opinion, would be incredibly fun to play as if they design them in a good way. So you must have heard of Tinkers or Engineers, and almost exclusively they are gnomes and goblins and sometimes dwarves. However, seeing how widespread the technology is now in the factions, there is literally no reason that all races can become a Tinker, as you can get the engineering profession. However, these guys are a bit different than your engineers building mounts and these flying toys. They are weapons of destruction with a great history in the Warcraft lore with very heavy support. Generally, they use a robot-like mech suit, which physically makes them more resilient and powerful than any other playable race. They are able to fly with it, shoot rockets, attack in melee, which means they could literally become everything aside from maybe healers, and could very easily become a really cool tanking class. However, other than the mech suits, they are come in all shapes and sizes with minor attachments helping them, and various robots and pets. We have seen them using things such as miniguns, mechanical shields, flamethrowers, and all sorts of gadgets. Really, Blizzard has their hands open to introduce whatever they wish with them, which means that they could really shape them as unique and a super fun class to play as, which would definitely be a good thing for their marketing, as people would wanna return back to WoW to check out this class. As the main two technological races, the goblins and gnomes, exist, the Tinkers are split mainly into these two schools. So the goblins are a lot more unstable and are about just explosion and just sheer firepower, while the gnomes are a bit more well thought out, well engineered, and sophisticated technology. However, this of course doesn't mean that only these two races can utilize this technology, as pretty much any race should be able to become a Tinker. Flying units. So, this is one of the classes that all of you Warcraft 3 lovers remember, and you have definitely seen these throughout World of Warcraft, although right off the bat, and yeah, that is intentional with the Bat Riders, it is impossible to actually add them to the game as it currently is and the way it currently works. We have two different variations, the more support and destruction based ones, so these would be your Bat Riders and Gyrocopters, and the more offensive and just straight out attackers, the Wind and the Griffin Riders, and all the Night Elven and the Blood Elven variations. Now, the Griffin and the Wind Riders are as straightforward as it gets, usually orcs and dwarves riding on a Griffin or a Wyvern and just throwing hammers and spears. On the other hand, there is a bit more of an interesting flying class, the Troll Bat Riders, as well as the Gnomish Gyrocopters. Both of them are more supportive classes, although the Troll Bat Riders are a bit more mobile and just kinda sheer destruction as they throw fire and can just light up entire settlements, while the Gyrocopters can shoot up in the air. They can also throw bombs, although the machinery makes them a bit of an easier target, at least in my opinion. Now, I know it sounds incredibly ridiculous, as these could be added, as it wouldn't really fit with the way the game is built, and Blizzard kinda tried to emulate these by giving us quests where you shoot down things and burn down things. However, it will be really fun to play as an actual Troll Bat Rider or any of these classes. Maybe if they add mounted combat at some point in the future. They have really unique lore and an actual tradition, as all these are not just warriors on flying machines and animals, but they really are a unique class of their own. Mountain King. This is a dwarf-only class and also a classic from Warcraft 3. Now, you might have noticed that Blizzard adapted this class to regular warriors and gave dwarves some of their abilities as racials, but the Mountain Kings are actually a thing and they exist, despite their lore being kinda vague. They are known as Thanes in Cosmodan, and they're essentially just elite dwarven warriors. While a lot of dwarves are about mining, weapons, crafting, rifles, and all these things, these guys are literally just just about combat and fighting. They wield enchanted warhammers and hand axes, they conjure magic hammers to hurl at their targets, and transform themselves into creatures of living stone to fend off attacks using their old Titan heritage. Mountain Kings are known to seek out combat and ferocious enemies such as dragons or demons, and generally they're nobles and those higher up in dwarven society, therefore called kings, despite not necessarily being kings. Now, their lore is a bit flimsy with all the changes with the Chronicle, the fact that they were sort of merged with regular warriors, but they also sort of exist. Think of Mountain Kings as something like really elite warriors that are few and far between. The only problem with them being playable is the fact that they're a dwarf thing only, and actually more like an Ironforged dwarf thing only. However, there are a couple of them in the game that you might have seen. Some of them were the actual king like Magni Bronzebeard, and the most notable one, his brother Muradin. Rune Master. This is the only class on this list that was seriously considered to be added by Blizzard originally to World of Warcraft. It was said that they were scrapped early in development before Classic, and they were replaced by Druids and Warlocks as they kinda repurposed some of their original abilities. Then in Wrath of the Lich King, before they added Death Knights, the Runemasters were a really big possibility, but then some of their features were then merged into Death Knights and just nothing really came out of it. Now, you may be thinking, what even is a Rune Master? And you have probably seen some of them in the game, mainly as enemies, and they're definitely a bit vague and just kinda all over the place. Well, they are definitely a bit confusing, but the way Blizzard saw them as a playable class was a mix between a rogue or a monk that wrote runes in order to empower themselves. They would cast runes on their body, but also on the ground, giving AoE abilities. Now, in the lore, they're essentially arcane spellcasters that are melee fighters that inscribe runes and utilize the power of the very impotent ley lines. The way you have paladins, that is between a priest and a warrior, well, a Rune Master would be a mix between an arcane mage and a warrior. They are highly tied to the ancient times of the Titans and their runic magic, and dwarven ancestors used to be Rune Masters, but over time they forgot this knowledge, and in the RPG lore that is not fully canon, the Tauren picked up rune casting as well. Overall though, they are a really interesting class that could still be added at some point and actually have a really unique blend of a melee warrior and a spellcaster. Thank you for watching. Check out how will undead paladins be explained in the lore by clicking on the screen, and check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos of real world history. See you next time.